Oh.
Yeah, right.
My name is Rabbi Antin Antin. I'm the senior rabbi of this congregation, of course, joined by our associate rabbi, Rabbi Cooper. And we'd like to welcome everybody here to this very, very important get-together as we welcome Governor Larry Hogan to our synagogue. We've already had the governor in our sukkah a few years ago. We had him in our social hall, and now we have him in our sanctuary. So that's really very special. And especially at this time, as a Jewish community, we've faced a lot of difficulty with anti-Semitism here in America. And of course, our hearts and minds are with our brothers and sisters in Israel. And Governor Hogan has said so many things and done so many things throughout his political career to support Israel and the Jewish community. We're very grateful for everything that you've done. It's really wonderful to have you here. And it's really wonderful to partner with the JCRC and Ron Halber organization that does so much on behalf of our community. So I'd like to call up Ron to introduce the governor.
Thank you, Rabbi Antin, and thank you everybody for joining us here today. Wonderful to see such a large crowd midday right before Shabbat. Good afternoon. My name is Ron Halber, and it's my privilege to serve as the Executive Director of the JCRC of Greater Washington. And we thank Beth Sholom for their hospitality and welcome everyone here today joining us to hear from Governor Larry Hogan as he seeks to become the next United States Senator from the great state of Maryland. This is the first of a series of JCRC forums that will be held with major candidates for the United States Senate from Maryland. Now, the lawyers require me to say this. Please note, the JCRC is a tax-exempt, nonprofit, 501c3 organization and is prohibited from participating in political campaigns or endorsing candidates for office. That clearly just flows off the tongue. The Jewish community enjoyed a warm friendship and partnership with Governor Hogan and his administration during his 2 years in office. As governor, he cut taxes 8 years in a row by $4.7 billion, including the largest tax cuts in Maryland history. And under his leadership, Maryland produced the greatest economic turnaround, going from 49 out of 50 states to number 6. And he restored peace and order to Baltimore during the riots of 2015, made historic investments in education, transportation, infrastructure, and protecting the environment. And many of you may remember that he did this while overcoming his personal and public battle with cancer. Governor Hogan was only the second Republican in Maryland history to be re-elected to a second term as governor. He's always been an ardent supporter of the state of Israel and the U.S.-Israel relationship, and I had the pleasure of participating with him on his 10-day economic mission to Israel, which provided amazing results. And the governor has always forcefully and without equivocation publicly condemned anti-Semitism. He championed record levels of funding to provide security of Jewish institutions, resources to our agencies to provide social services, and assistance to our day schools. It's now my pleasure to welcome Governor Hogan.
Thank you all very, very much. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Rabbi. I want to thank the JCRC and Beth Sholom for welcoming us, for extending this invitation. It's a pleasure to be back here among so many friends this afternoon. And I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you at this very challenging time for Israel, for Maryland's Jewish community, and for Jews all across the world. This is the first time that I stand before you as a candidate for the United States Senate. However, I'm no newcomer to this community. Some of the people in this room have come to know me over the past decade as we work together to change Maryland for the better. From day one, I made it clear that there would be no place for anti-Semitism in the state of Maryland. we increased, as Ron said, or the rabbi said, I think Ron said, that we increased funding for security at schools and synagogues and child care centers that were at risk of hate crimes. We supported private schools, including Jewish schools all across the state, by funding the Boost Scholarship Program to help thousands of children attend the school of their choice, because I believe that every child in Maryland deserves a world-class education, regardless of what community they happen to grow up in. Our Boost Scholarship Program helped make that vision a reality for thousands of children all across the state. And when the county executive here in Montgomery County ordered the private schools, including all the Jewish schools, to close, we immediately responded and took a stand for common sense, demanding that these schools should have the right to make that determination for themselves. For 8 years, we worked tirelessly together with you to strengthen our already strong relationship with Israel. And as Ron said, one of my very first trade missions as governor was to Israel. Ron and some of you accompanied us on that trip. We had a great visit. I know Rona Kramer, who was cabinet secretary in our administration. Thank you for all of your hard work. 8 years in administration. Amazing. I'll never forget the incredibly moving experience as I was brought to tears laying a wreath at Yad Vashem in remembrance of the 6 million Jewish victims of unspeakable acts of violence. We deepened our economic partnerships with Israeli businesses and universities, especially in the fields of cybersecurity, biotechnology, the life sciences, and defense, including recruiting the Israeli company Elta, which produced technology for the Iron Dome, to locate its North American headquarters here in the state of Maryland. We established a sister state relationship between Maryland and the Negev region, and we made it strongly and repeatedly clear that Maryland would stand steadfast in solidarity with Israel against the BDS movement. I was the first governor in America to sign an executive order prohibiting all executive state agencies and departments from entering into any contracts with any business unless that business certified that they would not engage in BDS. And I grieved with you after the tragedy at the Tree of Life shooting. We've been through a lot together, and I've always been proud to stand arm in arm with you. But the challenges that we confront today are far greater than anything that we've faced over the past decade. This is a moment when our leaders must be held accountable for their words and their actions. There are times in history when leaders must stand up for what is right, regardless of party affiliation or their personal interests. I actually learned this at a young age from my dad, who was a congressman from Maryland, who was on the House Judiciary Committee during the impeachment of Richard Nixon. He was the very first Republican to come out for Nixon's impeachment. And in recent years, I think you know that I've never hesitated or lacked the courage to stand up to my own party and to do the right thing for the country. I believe that the days and the months following the horrific attacks of October 7th were one of these critical moments that represent a time for choosing. Back in October, I was looking forward to doing 2 fellowships at Harvard University, one in the School of Public Health on our nation-leading COVID response, the other in the Kennedy School of Government, talk about how to fix the broken politics in America. You know, I'm a guy who struggled to work my way through Florida State University, so it was kind of a big deal. You know, I was honored to receive these fellowship opportunities at such a distinguished university. I actually asked them if they had checked my transcripts. I was very much looking forward to it. I was at the University of Chicago doing a fellowship at the time. But when I saw the university refusing to condemn the protest, attempting to justify and celebrate Hamas terrorism, I stood up immediately and resigned from both of those fellowships. Just after the greatest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust, we saw demonstrations essentially blaming the innocent victims of the horrific attack who were murdered, kidnapped, and raped. And they were attacking the legitimacy of the world's only Jewish state and its right to defend itself. Jews have been harassed and made to feel unsafe in their schools and synagogues and everywhere they go. And these were not isolated incidents. Anti-Semitic incidents in the United States have risen by nearly 400%. We saw college presidents at some of our most prestigious universities in January refusing to answer to Congress whether calling for the genocide of Jews violated their campus policies. The lessons of history are crystal clear. We must all take a stand in the face of genocidal acts. There's no both sides when it comes to the murder, rape, and kidnapping of innocent women and children. There's no room for justification or equivocation for calls to kill all the Jews. This is not a partisan issue. This isn't about the differences between the right and the left. This is about the difference between right and wrong. I've always had a great deal of respect for Senator Ben Cardin, and I want to take a moment to recognize and thank him for his many years of service. You know, we may not have always agreed on every issue, but we always work together across the aisle as Team Maryland. And he should be commended for his consistent and strong support for Israel in the face of pressure from the loudest and angriest voices. And I want you to know that if I have the honor of becoming your next senator, and that is exactly the kind of leadership that you will continue to see from me. Sadly, this type of leadership has become far too rare in Washington. It's not what you're getting from Maryland's junior senator, who has become one of the most hostile voices against Israel in the entire United States Senate. Just this week, he signed an outrageous letter urging President Biden to cut off aid to Israel. Both of my potential Democratic opponents in this race have demanded that Israel enact an immediate and unilateral ceasefire. And they've even compared Israel's actions of self-defense to the atrocities of October 7th. One of them was applauded by CARE, whose national director said that he was, quote, happy to see the atrocities of October 7th, and whose Maryland director took to social media to glorify Hamas terrorists and to compare Israel to Nazi Germany. Look, of course, none of us wants to see death and suffering. We all want to see the violence come to an end. And the way to solve this humanitarian crisis and achieve a ceasefire is for Hamas leaders to immediately release every single one of those hostages. And then they should surrender and be held accountable. I recognize that there are politicians who will say and do anything to win an election, but I think you know that I'm not one of them. Too many politicians are more interested in campaign slogans and sound bites rather than real solutions. Too many without the courage to stand up and do the right thing. A couple of weeks ago, we saw a bipartisan package to secure the southern border and to support Israel and Ukraine and other key American allies fail because people were told to vote against a critical bill that they claimed to be for. And it made me frustrated enough that I knew I had to step up and try to do something about it. That was the moment when I decided to run for the United States Senate. Now, I don't need another title. I wasn't looking for a job. And I have no interest in being just another Washington politician who spends all their time arguing and never getting anything done. And I never will be one of them. But the chaos, divisiveness, and dysfunction in Washington creates chaos, divisiveness, and dysfunction around the world. Our allies, like Israel and Ukraine, still believe in America, but they worry that America is too divided to believe in itself. America needs to stand up for our allies and stand up to our enemies. And the best way to secure peace is through a strong America that supports its allies. The fight to support Israel and to confront this epidemic of anti-Semitism in our society has sadly only just begun. At this critical moment, Maryland needs a pro-Israel champion in the United States Senate. Who will stand up and fight for our closest and most important ally. If I have the honor of becoming your next senator, that is exactly what I will be, just like I was for 8 years as your governor. Look, this isn't just your typical fight between Republicans and Democrats. It's more important than that. This is a fight for Maryland and for America's future. And that is a fight worth fighting. I'm running for the United States Senate, not to serve one party, but to fix the broken politics in Washington and to fight for Maryland. That's exactly what I did as your governor. Exactly how I will serve you in the United States Senate. Thank you so much for having me. Ron, thank you very much. Please sit down.
So we're
Ron
gonna,
said he's going to grill me for 15 minutes.
no. So we're gonna take questions for about 15 minutes. Then the governor will have some time to talk with individuals as he leaves for 3 minutes, and then he'll have some private time with the media. So, I'm gonna stick to 15 minutes, and you know me, I do. So keep your questions short, and we'll start.
I'll try to keep my answers short too, but
No restriction on you, Governor. Sir, please stand and ask your question.
Will you vote for Donald Trump?
No.
Sir.
Governor Hogan,
pleasure to have listened to you today. I'm so proud of you. So proud to see that you're my governor.
Thank you.
I've been a resident of Maryland for 12 years. And I'd just like to ask you about your path to the Senate going forward.
Ask me about my,
Your path to the Senate going forward.
Yeah.
I don't really follow Maryland politics that much.
Yeah.
Or the federal.
You'll live a lot longer.
yeah. Yes.
Talk a little bit about the conditions, political conditions in the state that made you governor and how the situation changes now and your electability.
Yeah, well, thank you very much and appreciate the kind words. It is, we'll talk a little bit, for those of you who didn't hear, was about the question about the path to the Senate and how I was governor in the state and how we were able to, work together and get things done. Look, Maryland is the bluest state in America. Donald Trump lost this state by 33 percentage points, more than any other place. He lost to Hillary Clinton by 31 points. I ran for governor in 2014. There are only 20% of the people in Maryland are Republican. When I said I'm thinking about running for governor, some of my friends laughed and they said, "Really, what state?" I was fed up and frustrated that the one party monopoly had, just decimated our economy, and I thought the state was way off track. And a poll came out, said 48% of all the people in Maryland wanted to move. They were laughing at Maryland, calling us the California of the East, which they did not mean as a compliment. And so I stepped up and ran for governor. I started a group called Change Maryland. That was a grassroots group, just as many Democrats and independents as there were Republicans. We pulled off the biggest surprise upset in America in 2014. And in 2018, as Republicans were losing the Senate, the House, they were losing governors all across the country, I won in a landslide and became only the second Republican in the entire 246-year history of the state to be reelected. I think it's because of the way I listened to everyone, and then I tried to deal with problems and reach across the aisle with my 70% Democratic legislature and find actual bipartisan common sense solutions, which is, I think, what's desperately needed in Washington. Most people in America feel like things are way off track and that both parties are drifting apart and nobody ever gets anything done. They just yell at one another. So that's why I'm running. It's a hard race, to win as a person that has an R next to my name in a state where the guy at the top of the ticket is going to lose by 30 points in my state. He may actually get elected, but he's not going to get elected in Maryland. And so I've got to convince people that regardless of party affiliation, that I'm the person that they'd like to see represent the Senate. And that's an enormous task. One of the people I'm running against, the congressman from here in Montgomery County, is a billionaire who's already spent $30 million running television commercials. I'm sure you've already seen them. So it's hard to overcome that. However, I entered the race 30 days ago, 16 points ahead in this bluest state in America. Orly? Hi.
Well, Governor, I like making this a habit.
Yeah.
Our second.
Yeah, I was at APAC with you on Monday night.
And you are a superstar there as you are here. So the follow-up question to that is, how can we help you?
Well, thank you. It's great to see you again. Thanks for showing up. I enjoyed our conversation, and thanks for taking care of all the people at the emergency rooms. Look, the most importantly, I want you to talk to your friends and your neighbors and the people that you associate with, and tell them that they should consider, making a change, that they should consider sending a message to Washington, that regardless of their party affiliation, I'm going to be a guy that is going to, I think, be a voice that's important in Washington. Some Democrats are concerned about, hey, we can't elect a Republican that's going to tip the balance of, the Senate. Well, I don't think I'm going to be the blue state in the country is not going to be the one that tips it. I think there's a likelihood that Democrats are going to win the House. The Republicans are definitely going to win the Senate. There's 34 races in the country. I'm the least likely to succeed. There are 10 states that Democrats are trying to defend that are very competitive states, and if Republicans win one of them, they have control of the Senate. So, but I'm going to be a voice. I think if you're a Republican, I'm going to be a person that's going to stand up when I don't agree with my party and be a voice of reason to try to get back to a more traditional Republican Party. And if you're a Democrat, you should consider sending me down there for the same reason. One more freshman Democrat in the Senate is not going to change things. A person like me that's going to go shake things up and have the courage to stand up to both sides, I think can make a real difference in Washington.
Governor, thank you very much for joining us today and giving us the opportunity to speak with you what your positions are. What is your take on the comments made by Senator Schumer and following our president relative to the Prime Minister of Israel and his unfitness to be the Prime Minister?
Yeah, I was shocked and outraged by Schumer's comments. Look, this isn't Netanyahu's war. This is Israel's war. And whether you like Netanyahu or not, we shouldn't have an American politician, especially one who's Jewish, trying to tell the people in Israel what they should do about politics. It's really it's for the people of Israel to decide in the election, and trying to conflate it's all his fault that we're in this situation. We're in this situation because of the terrorist attack on October 7th, and Israel had a right to defend it. Jonathan?
Governor, was it because one of your aims when you hopefully become senator to get on one of your appropriations committee and hopefully shake things up? And what plans do you do to really get this budget in order?
Well, the budget is a mess. I think the debt that they're running up is contributing to the inflation problem that all Americans are experiencing. I mean, people are scripting. The Biden administration keeps saying that everything's fine and all the numbers look good, but the average American doesn't feel that way. They're still struggling to put groceries on the table and pay their bills. This is something, it's the reason I ran for governor, was to straighten out the horrible budget mess and the terrible economy that we had in Maryland. Ron said in his introduction, when I ran for governor, we were 49th out of 50 states in economic performance. When I left, we were number 6. It was the biggest economic turnaround in America. Before I became governor, they were spending like crazy. They passed 43 tax hikes in a row. I cut, with the Democratic legislature, 70%. I cut taxes 8 years in a row by $4.7 billion. I inherited a $5 billion deficit. I turned it into a $5 billion surplus. That's the kind of fiscal discipline and leadership that we need in Washington, where they keep just spending and ruining our economy.
Okay. Thanks very much for being here. We really, really appreciate it. Following up on the domestic policy questions, looking at the budget and as political document as that is, there are 2 elements in there that I find very disturbing. One is the lack of funding of our needed defense capabilities, fewer ships in the Navy, et cetera, et cetera. And the other is the Social Security and Medicare trust funds, which are on the path to insolvency. I'd like to know what your opinions are about what to do about those 2 things.
Well, thank you very much for all of the problem points and all the issues all around the world. The last thing we need is have a weakened American military. I said I was a Ronald Reagan peace through strength guy, and we've been decimating the military, and we're stretched thin all over the world. And so we've got to fund the military. With respect to Social Security, you're right, it's going to be insolvent in a few years. And this is one of those issues where Republicans and Democrats, they rather use it as an attack on the other side than to actually sit down and negotiate to fix the problem. It's certainly not going to happen in an election year like this, and nobody wants to talk about what the possible solutions might be or how we're going to accomplish it. And both sides are just using it more as a political football, which they do on so many things. But this is a huge issue that people are not going to have the benefits they need unless we find a way to make it fiscally solvent. And that's going to take Republicans and Democrats sitting down after the election. And it's going to happen in the next couple of years, or we're in trouble. We're going to hit a wall. They've got to negotiate in good faith and figure out what are all the possible solutions. And that's something that I think we should all be focused on.
What remaining, who has a question? Right here. Sir, and then ma'am, and okay, my buddy in the back. 3.
You mentioned an agenda to fight it.
That's a short minute.
You mentioned the agenda to fight anti-Semitism. Can you give us more examples of how you would do that in any kind of ethnic zealotness against Americans? Also, just a curiosity about what do you think of TikTok, and what do you think about, more importantly, the Chinese implication of trade.
What was the first, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part.
About how to deal with zeal against bigotry?
Your plan for anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism. Well, look, I, for 8 years as governor, I stood up to all hate crimes and all hate speech, and regardless of who's being attacked. And I, my wife and daughters are Asian, and during the COVID response, there was a huge uptick in hate speech and hate attacks against Asians, and we started the first task force in America. Ralph Herr, who was the U.S. attorney that just did this thing this week, was the guy that headed up that task force. He was the U.S. attorney for Maryland. But it doesn't matter, it was bringing people together and trying to lower the temperature. During the riots in Baltimore, I spent an entire week walking the streets and trying to lower the temperature and bring people together. And I met with faith leaders and community leaders and the NAACP. I think just in general, we need more people willing to talk to one another and listen to one another. And I think the loudest and angriest voices get way too much attention. And most of the rest of us are completely fed up and disgusted with all of that hate. TikTok, it's a really important issue that they're addressing, and I'm not privy to the latest information that they provided to to the Congress in private. Obviously, it must have been pretty serious for them to act, but the federal government told us a year and a half ago that this was a huge, serious problem. And I became the first governor in America to ban TikTok from state devices, from our computers and state phones, because they were stealing information. It is a cyber threat. But by the same token, it's a platform that, when you start getting into regulating it. So it's an issue we have to address in Congress. I don't know the latest specifics, but we were told by the federal government what a threat it was while I was governor, and we took action. And then Andy, will be the
Hi,
final
Governor,
question.
thank you for coming. I have a question more on the state level that's similar to the gentleman's. You mentioned Senator Van Hollen and the care member on the Maryland Hate Task Force, but Howard County has already voted on a declaration for an immediate ceasefire. It's on the ballot here in Montgomery County. Our county executive, Art Elrich, was involved in a letter calling for an immediate ceasefire and end of aid to Israel. I wanted to know your opinion on the state level, what you think needs to be done that isn't being done. I would say even in my own community, at our synagogue, the Israeli flag has been ripped off and stolen twice. Posters have been ripped off. It seems like the temperature is rising, and you talked about bringing the temperature down. So I wanted to know what you felt on a state level that needs to be done that isn't being done.
Well, it's a really good question. Obviously, there's no simple solution to stopping all the hate and all of the hate crimes and the anti-Semitism and things like ripping down flags at synagogues. It is. I'm disappointed that we haven't heard too many state or county leaders speaking out at all, and when they or our congressional delegation or our senators. I think, like I said in my remarks earlier, I think this is a time when you can't be silent, that you need to stand up. And they're either not standing up at all, or they're on the wrong side. So it's something we have to address. And I would say it's very important for your community to try to help educate your county executive or Howard County or, state leaders, and tell them exactly what you're experiencing and how and why they should stand up and help. Andy.
Hi, Governor. You touched on this just a little bit, but I'm wondering if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more. I'm one of those many Montgomery County Democrats that voted twice for you.
Thank you.
And really here today to find a way to get comfortable with voting for, given the state of the Republican Party today, voting for anybody that has an RNS.
Yeah.
Can you sort of find a way to make it comfortable?
Yeah, well, I hope. Yeah, thank you. I understand the concern, and I don't blame you one bit. And I hear that from other people who say, "I really like you. I voted for you twice. I think you're a great governor, but I can't vote for anybody that's a Republican because of how terrible, with some of the things they totally disagree with where the Republican Party is going." And I guess I can't really totally assuage any concerns other than to say, I think after 10 years that you know me, I'm not like the average Republican. I've stood up and spoken out more than any other person in America. And I think it's important to have that voice. You know, some people say I was very close to, they were trying to draft me to become the independent candidate for no labels to run for president. And I made the decision not to do that because I didn't think there was a path to victory and I might just enable someone else to win that. But in the Senate, I think I can be that same voice of moderation and the same way I have been as governor. I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to be the deciding vote, but I'll be the most important one in those discussions when we're trying to get Democrats and Republicans to work together. And I'll be the most important voice standing up to any, you know, far right Republican stuff that I don't agree with, just like I have been as governor and as chairman of the National Governors Association, where I brought 50 governors together on so many important issues and found common ground. That's the way I'll continue to serve you. There'll be no reason for you to think I'd all of a sudden become a cartoon caricature figure of a Republican when I think you know me better than that. People of Maryland know me. I've been here working with you for 14 years, or for 10 years at least, since 14. And I said I'll be exactly the same kind of senator as I was governor. So I'm hoping I can convince you. Maybe afterwards I'll sit down and talk to you some more. I'll twist your arm.
Governor, thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.